Hey, good morning to you all. We're going to get started here. Hey, so good morning again. My name is Will Johnson, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Logistics and Mission Support at Leidos out of our Defense Group. And it's my pleasure today to introduce Undersecretary Deborah G. Rosenblum. Ms. Rosenblum currently serves as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs. In this capacity, she is the Principal Advisor to the Secretary, Deputy Secretary, and Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment on nuclear weapons, nuclear energy, and biological and chemical programs. As if that was not enough, she's also currently performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Industrial Base Policy, serving as the Principal Advisor to the Secretary, Deputy Secretary, and Undersecretary of Defense Acquisitions and Sustainment on the Industrial Base Policies. Her principal duty is the overall supervision of the Department of Defense efforts to develop and maintain the defense industrial base of the United States to ensure a secure supply of materials and critical materials to the national security. Leading these two areas brings together capabilities that are certainly interested to us here at SENEDIA. Prior to her position as the Assistant Secretary of Defense, she was Executive Vice President at the Nuclear Threat Initiative. As part of the NTI's executive leadership team, she helped to oversee the organization's operations, development, and programs, managing an annual budget of $15 to $20 million. Undersecretary Rosenblum spent 7 years as Vice President of the Cohen Group, an international consulting firm. She served in senior positions with the U.S. Department of Defense in the areas of Homeland Defense, peacekeeping operations, and support nuclear forces and counterproliferation policy. Ms. Rosenblum holds a master's degree from Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs and is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate with a bachelor's degree from Middleburg College. Madam Secretary.
So, thank you very much, William. It's certainly been a terrific morning for us. There has been dynamic speakers, wonderfully informative exhibits, and really very passionate and dedicated national security companies, all exploring different ways to strengthen U.S. defense. So as a result of that, I am very honored to be your keynote speaker to kick off the mini summit that we're doing at Department of Defense, the title of which is Building on the Shipbuilding Workforce. And this, as all of you know in this room, is a vital issue for our national security. Before I begin, however, I would like to thank Senator Reid for his ongoing support of the Department of Defense. As a SAS chairman, he is a tireless advocate and dedicated leader on U.S. national security, as well as the importance of having a resilient defense industrial base. I'd also like to thank Governor Dan McGee for his steadfast leadership and advocacy of small businesses here in Rhode Island. And all of us know that none of this work here at this forum will be possible without our partners at SENEDIA. As we heard last night, Molly McGee does an amazing job, not just as putting these kinds of events together, but in supporting partnerships across New England that truly support our national defense. So thank you. I also cannot say it enough that businesses here in Rhode Island and across New England are critical to the defense industrial base, from the shipyards to advanced sensors to microelectronics. Your companies, both large and small, are driving innovation and building resilience across the defense enterprise. Thank you, and thank you, and thank you again for all that you are doing in support of the warfighter. As many of you know and just heard from Will, I'm performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Industrial Base Policy. In this role, I am focused on cultivating and maintaining the resilience of the most innovative defense industrial base in the world. And it is business like yours that is helping us with this success. Amongst the many areas of focus, one that we are particularly working on is empowering small businesses. American small businesses spur innovation, represent most of the new entrants into the defense industrial base, and through that growth, create the next generation of suppliers with increasingly diverse capabilities. Yet over the past decade, small businesses in the defense industrial base have shrunk by over 40%. While DoD continues to exceed our contracting goals, spending over $80 billion a year with small business, we must continue to reverse this downward trend. Small businesses are the heart of American manufacturing, and DoD is committed to support them to succeed, prosper, and remain competitive. Our goal is to increase the innovative capacity of the defense industrial base, and to do so, we must systemically identify and mitigate pain points associated with doing business with the Department of Defense, particularly for new entrants and non-traditional players. And this is where larger companies can help us. By participating in the Mentor-Protege program and investing the time and effort to qualify new small businesses in your supply chains, larger companies can be part of a dynamic process that brings small businesses in to do business with us. But as we also think about innovation, we must also think about the resilience. The fragility of the defense ecosystem is top of mind in ways in which it has not been for decades, and it is explicitly called out in the National Defense Strategy that the Biden administration has released on an unclassified basis in recent weeks. Efforts are underway across the U.S. government to understand and mitigate some of the most glaring vulnerabilities. For more than 50 years, market forces in the United States have prioritized supply chain efficiency over supply chain resilience. And the events of the past few years, COVID-19, along with the invasion of Ukraine, have crystallized the need to prioritize and invest in resilience across the defense ecosystem. We are very aware that we are facing shortages in vital components like microelectronics, but we cannot overlook that we are also falling far short in critical skills, like those required for shipbuilding, such as welding, pipe fitting, and machining. The last 2 years have revealed serious gaps in these areas in our defense industrial base. And this has also been exacerbated by our over-reliance on foreign manufacturing and a shortage of trade and industry-skilled workers. Supply chain resilience and workforce development are not just economic priorities, but they are fundamentally national security imperatives. So what are we going to do about this to address these vulnerabilities? As many of you may be aware, within the first 100 days, President Biden issued an executive order on America's supply chains, aimed at revitalizing, fortifying, and in some instances, rebuilding our domestic sources for our supply chains. Recognizing the diverse set of challenges facing different supply lines, the Department of Defense has prioritized 5 key areas. The first of which is castings and forgings, second, missiles and munitions, third, energy storage and batteries, fourth, strategic and critical materials, and fifth, microelectronics. And taking this EO, the Department of Defense built over a 1-year period a supply chain strategy and report, and as well as directed through the President's budget direct investments in these high priority defense critical sectors, including over $250 million for strategic and critical materials and over $600 million for kinetic capabilities such as missiles and munitions. We rely predominantly on two core investment programs, IBAS, as well as the Defense Production Act, and have a combined request of over $1 billion in the next fiscal year. These investments complement $1 billion in requested DoD spending on microelectronics, as well as, of course, and we heard a little bit about this morning, the groundbreaking investments for domestic production in the recently signed CHIPS Act. Each of these efforts will help to address discrete problems of obsolescence, supply chain bottlenecks, and hopefully will boost domestic production for components that support everything from munitions to satellites to submarines. But to be truly resilient and to unleash the innovative energy of our country, we must also focus on the role of critical manufacturing skills and workforce development. You all are more aware than most Americans that workers are a critical component to these supply chains, and they really make them possible. In U.S. manufacturing, however, the gap between open positions and available workers is, bluntly speaking, not expected to close. We estimate 2.1 million unfilled jobs by 2030. The department is continuing to encourage careers and education not only in STEM fields, but also in critical manufacturing jobs, and we also are encouraging those for other federal agencies, state and local governments, and school districts. Closing this 2.1 million jobs gap will go a long way to ensuring critical defense industries have the workers necessary to mitigate weaknesses in our domestic supply chains. Through our IBAS program, and we'll hear a little bit more about it today, and we have many of our team members here who would be delighted to speak with you during the breaks, we've established the National Imperative for Industrial Skills Initiative, where we work with industry and academia to help attract, recruit, train, and retain the industrial workforce that the nation needs. This effort focuses on skills such as welding, advanced machining, electronics, precision optics, digital and additive manufacturing, and other emerging Industry 4.0 skills that are needed to build and sustain all of the diverse platforms and weapon systems that are critical to defending our country and those of our allies. Since fiscal year 2019, we have invested roughly $130 million in industrial workforce development and training projects to help improve and scale workforce pipelines. And here in New England, we have made very targeted investments to develop the critical skills needed in the submarine industrial base. In fact, we've requested over $200 million for workforce development in the submarine industrial base in FY23 alone. That's because over the next 10 years, Electric Boat estimates that we need to hire 18,000 new employees to support the Virginia and Columbia-class submarine production programs. That peak in skill demand intersects with very difficult demographic trends in the region as workers retire and relocate. The scale of the challenge and the importance of submarine production to our overall national security means that it is frankly beyond the ability of any one state, agency, or manufacturer to solve. That's why we have partnered with SENEDIA and their Next Generation Partnership for Submarine Shipbuilding Workforce Development efforts. This is a regional industry partnership that is addressing sector-wide workforce challenges through prototyping and sharing effective and impactful national solutions. In the first 2 years, the project has trained over 1,400 skilled workers through trades programs, while also expanding the diversity, equity, and inclusion for underrepresented communities through programs such as Boat for Veterans, Boat for Women, and Boat for Next Generations. These 3 to 6 week after-hours programs bring awareness and exposure to careers in the maritime trade through activities focused on welding, shipbuilding, fitting, machining, sheet metal, pipe fitting, and electrical skills. We are also aggressively scaling regional investments in our current budget request, allocating over $700 million through FY27 to support the submarine workforce development activities. These include the rapid scaling of a New England regional training system supporting submarine shipbuilders, suppliers, and public shipyards. These investments will also help build out the next generation of new-collar workers. As we focus on state and regional candidate employer matching activities, the data analytics that are needed to support this, and much more. I am really grateful that this summit has presented me with an opportunity to come here to Rhode Island and meet with you and leaders throughout the region. DoD is dedicated to finding new ways to partner going forward to build enduring advantages as we advance America's national security and sustain America's economic future. And with that, thank you. I'm happy to take your questions.
Ma'am, thank you very much. I'll start it off, and then there's mics here, and we'll try and get one or two other questions asked. But ma'am, specifically, I heard you talk about the resilient supply chain and the need for the parts for the industrial base. And so as you are forming that policy, what are your thoughts? Could you expound a little bit about the problems of obsolescence and what that's doing to the industrial base?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that question. You know, I spoke a little bit earlier in the speech about the 5 critical areas that the Department of Defense, from a supply chain perspective, is focused on, and the example I'd like to give really is one on munitions. With the invasion by Russia of Ukraine, and all of the support, thanks to support from Congress, that we have gotten, where the U.S. has been able to provide really cutting-edge munitions and equipment to the Ukrainians as they battle back against the Russians, it has really left us having to look very hard at where we are with our munitions supply chain. And if I had one word to say, it is dealing with the challenges of obsolescence. We tend to have very much of a boom and bust cycle in our approach to munitions within the United States, as well as some of our key allies. We go through crisis periods where there is wonderful partnering between industry, the Department of Defense, Congress, to really get the war fighters, both here and abroad, the missiles and munitions that they need. But then when that immediate crisis has passed, we move back to a business as usual approach to things. And so when we're dealing with a crisis that wasn't anticipated over a multi-year period, that is creating a real spotlight into the areas of obsolescence that's there, and we all know it, in our supply chains. And this is something where, when we talk about the need for far greater transparency into our supply chains, you know, it's not enough for us collectively to say, well, the primes have it, it's okay. We know that these are supply chains that are shared by multiple primes across multiple platforms. And so when you're looking at how it is that we can speed up production to replace our own stockpiles as well as that of our allies who have been joining the United States in shoring up Ukraine, we have learned through our partnership with industry on this that there is some very serious obsolescence, things like stingers that we've not been making since 2008. And so that is one of the key challenges that we at the Department of Defense are very focused on, not only in the immediate term, and industry is being a wonderful partner on these deep dives into the supply chain with us, but also how do we get ourselves out of this Alice in Wonderland situation where we are, diving in deeply in a crisis, but then throttling back. How is there a way, and we're just beginning in consultation with Congress and with throughout the administration, of looking at how we can, create warm supply chains that will help to get us out of this boom and bust circumstance that we have in this particular case with munitions.
Ma'am, thank you very much. Any other questions? We're going to take two. And I'm sure the secretary wouldn't mind to go sit down. So, no questions? All right. Well, ma'am,
actually, let me I think this is apropos to this audience. Oftentimes I'm asked the question, what do I worry about the most, or what keeps me up at night? And there's a lot of stuff. If you work on nuclear, chemical, and biological, you don't sleep, basically. But that notwithstanding, when I have my industrial base hat on, there's a tremendous amount of work that we have to do, and we absolutely have to do it throughout, our interagency as well as with industry and state and local governments. But the number one thing that keeps me up at night is the workforce. And repeatedly, when I'm out talking with industry, both large and small, as well as talking with a lot of the program managers across the critical programs that we have in the nuclear area, and to a company, when I say to them, what's the thing that you are most worried about? They say it's workforce. And it's workforce in the immediate, where attrition rates are double what they were immediately before COVID. Companies that before saw attrition around 5% are now dealing with attrition around 12 to 15%. But it's also fundamentally the workforce of the future. So while we need people today to show up and do the jobs we need them to do, we also need generations of people who are interested in returning to manufacturing careers, who are interested to returning to support of defense and national security. And that is something that I worry a lot about. So with that, thank you and enjoy your lunch.
Well, ma'am, if you have 1 second, we want to thank you very much for taking time with us. And here's a coin for it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much.
Appreciate it. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Thanks. Is that one?
Yes,
Sorry. I'm losing my speed. Good thing it's over.
Yes.
On to the exhibit floor, and we will be coming back here at, let me check, 1:15? 1:15. See you then.